as entrepreneurs, we think, okay, what do people want? Versus, yes, what do people want, right? There has to be a market for it. And it has to serve you too.
Welcome to Midland Money Mindset, your weekly dose of inspiration and insights to ensure you enjoy each step of your journey. Whether you're saving for the future, planning your next big adventure, or simply looking to add more joy to your life, you've come to the right place. Now, let's dive in.
Too many women chasing success in real estate or business feel stuck trying to build wealth while juggling family, purpose, and self-care. Liz Faircloth knows that struggle firsthand. What started as a dream inspired by Rich Dad, Poor Dad became the real estate InvestHER movement, empowering women to own their worth, their wealth, and their time. Today, she's helping women everywhere create financial freedom, deepen their confidence, and live life with more balance, purpose, and joy. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into the show. Well, I am super excited today to have Liz Faircloth with us, and welcome to the show, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me, Larry. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, well, listen, we're going to spend a lot of time on what you're doing today and, everything you're up to. But, our listeners are really enamored with the entrepreneurial journey because for many it's different, sometimes similar, but long and windy path for many. So can you share with our listeners your journey to up into becoming an entrepreneur? And then we'll spend a lot of time on what you're doing today.
Sure. There's moments of our upbringing that we look back and go, oh, okay, that's why I did that. And I had a moment when I was in my childhood, I'm not going to give you my whole life story, but everyone was everyone loved Gatorade gum. I'm dating myself, but Gatorade gum was a very popular type of gum when I was growing up. And long story short, I noticed that many of my friends didn't know where to buy it. So I ended up figuring that out and had a little side business for a very short amount of time, but basically reselling gum. And that was like my first memory of entrepreneurship. And then I got shut down because they didn't want me selling anything on the bus to school, which I get. But I look back and go, okay, that makes sense. That was my first entrepreneurial, endeavor. But in terms of my path in entrepreneurship, I was going to get my degree in my master's degree in social work, wanted to open my own practice. And I was very focused on that as my focus. And at the same time, my brother-in-law handed me Rich Dad, Poor Dad and he was the only entrepreneur that I knew. He had started a company when he was in college. And I was like, what are you doing? And how are you doing it? And it's just like a foreign concept to me. I grew up in a, lovely middle-class family, but entrepreneurship and business ownership wasn't really something we talked about or I had any sort of familiarity with, and or property ownership, I should say too. But he handed me this book saying, this will change your life. And I said, I don't know about that, but okay, I'll trust you, Tony, in this moment. And so I read it, and that really did change my trajectory. There was concepts that Robert Kiyosaki talks about, and as a 21-year-old, never heard about, right? In terms of passive income and building your, working for yourself as a business owner. And also then how do you translate to becoming an investor and making your money work hard versus you working hard, and all the concepts are in that book. So that got me very intrigued with property ownership of real estate. And so at the time, I, now husband of 20 years, but then boyfriend. And we started taking classes and courses and managed and figure out how to muster up small loan from my father and bought our first property in our early 20s as a duplex outside of Philadelphia. And that really got our start into building a business around investing. Some people do investing or invest on the side, and we really developed a business out of it. And that was 20 years ago, and built a couple of thousand units under management, $160 million of a portfolio. But it started with a duplex, and many twists and turns along the way, but it started with that idea of, okay, I can really create something on my own. And what would that look like? And the idea of transforming properties into the highest and best use was something really intriguing.
Yeah. So a long way from selling Gatorade gum on the bus, it
completely.
sounds like. But it sounds like there was a little bit of a gap maybe between those, you like finding out about this entrepreneurial bug that you probably didn't even know what it was at the time. And then looking back, that was probably a good indicator that you were, somewhat on this path. So, I guess you kind of shared with us how you made this transition from going to school for social work to real estate investing. investing, but how do you make that leap? I mean,
Yeah.
they're not, I don't think they're really directly aligned
No.
unless there's some kind of line connecting the two that I'm unaware of or I'm not seeing. I'd love for you to share.
It wasn't a linear jump. And so at the time, I was finishing up my degree in getting my master's. And after reading that book and after meeting my now husband, we said, and after this one, you don't buy a duplex and you become financially free off of one duplex. This just doesn't work that way. And so I said, what if I got a position in more of like a business and getting sales experience? Because that was one of the skills that Kiyosaki really leans into, saying, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, if you want to be a successful investor, you need to learn how to sell. So I said, I don't know how to sell. I know I understand the concept, but I don't have any experience. So I shifted kind of focus of, okay, opening my own practice to joining a company, a small company in New Jersey, where I would basically work for a consulting company and I would sell the services and product to small businesses. And that's a leap. That's a leap in and of itself. But something that really intrigued me with this company was, really supporting the people within the company. I was a social worker by background, so people matter, and the idea of impacting people's life matters. And so I found this consulting company that was pretty much doing sort of like organizational development for companies. So it wasn't quite social work, but it wasn't far off of things that I enjoy doing, of really supporting people. And I didn't know what I was doing as a 22-year-old, but I learned, and it was basically like a personality assessment where we sold that into companies to help them hire, manage, and retain talent. Again, my experience level was very small on managing people or anything along those lines, but I quickly learned and I became very good at selling into the company, building the relationships, and then kind of growing with the company. So that was kind of a connection in the sense. At the same time, my husband decided to quit his job, and he was working as an engineer, went to school for engineering, decided to really become the full-time person focused on growing our portfolio. I was involved, but more on a part-time basis where it was in between kind of paying the bills, paying the mortgage, all the important things that actually matter. The one thing we did too, Larry, early on was because of this shift in our professional world and we really knew where we wanted to be, we both kind of decided to live below our means. So we bought like a smaller place. At that point, a lot of my friends were buying these, beautiful starter homes, starting a family immediately. And we just said, we really don't want to do that. We really want a different path. And so we decided to, buy a smaller place and a row home in New Jersey. Cute place, but still we wanted to live below our means so that we can kind of be a little more nimble. And then we do have children, but we didn't have children for 8 years. So, right. Just choices that are different than most, quote unquote, to live a different life and a life that we really wanted to on our own terms.
Yeah. So you definitely made that shift, and it's clear that there is some, listen, people matter, like you said, and your work in social work, I'm sure, is extremely helpful in what you do every day. So, one of the things I think you said you bought your first property in 2004, right? Mm-hmm. What has, having over a couple of decades at this point of real estate investing, what has it taught you in practical terms at this point?
Oh, so many things. When we started, I think so many people that are and obviously real estate, we learn that it's very hyper local. You can't say that a duplex is the same type of, it's a duplex, right? Or a single family home, but in different markets, it's worth different things. It could be used for different things, different strategies. Some towns are very, encourage short-term rentals. Other towns, no regulations are against it. So markets matter in real estate. Obviously the global market and the national market, but the local market really matters in this business and this, investment strategy. I didn't realize that to the degree I do now. And so I think when we started, because of my social work background, we got our start in buying properties in Trenton, New Jersey. And for those listeners, that aren't familiar with the great capital of New Jersey, I'm a Jersey girl through and through, born and raised. Trenton's the capital, and it still 15 years later from when we started investing there, or more than that, probably 17 years now, still figuring itself out, doesn't quite have the economy that we wished it did when we started and has developed into, has certain positives, and then it has also things that are up against for the city to thrive. And so at the time, though, we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to be able to afford property to, dilapidated property to make a difference. And we really saw Trenton to be a city that would be up and coming like many other urban communities, especially in the state of New Jersey. And so that didn't necessarily pan out the exact way we thought. However, we ended up buying over 100 units, 100 properties in Trenton over the years, and we did make a big difference and really took a lot of dilapidated properties and renovated them. So why I'm sharing all that is just that you can only change so much in the market. So that was a big learning for us. We did the best we could. We ended up, I think, doing very well in the city and making a big difference. And we did do well at moments financially. However, it was an uphill battle. And I don't think we chose the market correctly then, but we're much more mindful of that now.
Yeah, learning experience and location
Yeah,
in many different ways, right? That old adage is still rings true in so many ways. So
one other thing I'd say too is the power of supply and demand. I don't think I understood that either. quite honestly, in my 20s, and as we've looked at different markets, and we're even investing in our local market now in New Hope, Pennsylvania. We're doing a ground up construction project, probably the most expensive market we've ever invested in. However, if you're still on the equation of supply and demand and there's a high demand, low supply, typically that's a better position to be in than the latter. And again, I didn't understand that kind of microeconomic impact when we started. So those kinds of things you kind of learn along the way, but you got to understand because it matters.
Yeah, agreed. So, I mean, listen, you're going around, you're starting this, real estate investing. It sounds like you're starting out, mindfully, slow, building up some steam. What inspired you to turn it from, being a real estate investor, really to, having this like almost a movement, behind this? What inspired you to make that shift?
Yeah, with regards to InvestHER in particular. So my husband and I, it was an interesting moment. We had just had my first child, my son, Zach. And I left the job that I was sharing earlier about the organizational development. I left that and was able to leave that because of the business we built and the money that we were able to live on, which on paper was great, right? We were kind of like retired from that. And I was able to really join my husband full time, be home with our newborn, healthy little boy. And so things are on paper and just everywhere that anyone could see was very positive, right? We had a lot of things going. And something internally for me, Larry, was missing, to be honest. I had everything I kind of quote unquote wanted and everything I was working towards, but something was sort of missing. I love real estate. I love investing in real estate. However, what I was missing was like impacting people and sharing the things that we had learned along the way with others, especially when it comes to women. And my business partner at the time, and she was just a good friend of mine, we'd get together, we'd be going to events. Her and I would always go to events and we'd be like, where are the women in this business? And so we said, let's start a community for women who are investing in real estate, who want to take control of their financial future. And kind of what started is something for both me and then my business partner. While I was kind of going through this kind of pre-midlife crisis, my business partner was going through a divorce. And so it was like the worst time for her, quote unquote, to start something new. But she also saw the power in, especially for single women and single people, having financial stability and obviously financial wherewithal is really important, right? For everybody, especially for folks going through life-altering events like that. So together, for different reasons, we both wanted to create something for others, and we also wanted to create something for ourselves. And so that's really what created InvestHER, a community that was all about helping women live life on their own terms. There's no prescription. There's no amount of doors that you need to buy. It was about what success looks like for them. And also then having, a community, knowledge and kind of camaraderie and trainings and everything above to really share with women would be the key.
Yeah, so important. And then as a result, you also launched the InvestHER podcast, right? Was there a specific, reason behind going that route and launching that podcast in terms of...
We've been at it for over 500 episodes, almost 1 million downloads. And that was about 8 years ago. And that was at a time when podcasting was even different than it is obviously today.
Sure.
Well, we did something, and I always encourage people when they want to create something, especially we know as entrepreneurs, we think, okay, what do people want? Versus, yes, what do people want, right? There has to be a market for it. And it has to serve you too. Meaning, what's the passion behind it? Or what would be something that you're going to get from it as well? Podcasting is hard work. If you're not enjoying it, people get that. People could hear that. So when we started with our podcast. It was the first thing we did. We did some kind of like soul searching, and we both realized that we love inspiring other people, and we also love to be inspired. We're personal growth. We're both big into personal growth and kind of just continuous improvement of ourselves. We do a lot of work on ourselves. And so we said, podcast is a great thing to start because one, we're going to be energized doing it, connecting with women, as well as hopefully inspiring other women. So that was a very, very intentional reason we started with the podcast, because we could have started with anything, to be honest, especially, you think about people starting things now. And it's proved that it's been something where, we've had Kim Kiyosaki, we've had Sharon Lechter, we've had some amazing women on our podcast, and women just, figuring it out that are not well-known names, but they've created financial freedom, in real estate, and they're doing it on their own terms. So it has done the inspiring, right? Hopefully others as well as ourselves. Impact. So that's why the podcast was our first kind of step.
Yeah, great impact you're having. And, one of the things that I found very interesting is when I had the opportunity to ask Kevin O'Leary what his Shark Tank journey taught him, he told me that female entrepreneurs are his most successful. And, given all that you and Andressa have done to empower women, what have you learned about how we can empower, women further so they could be these most successful entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it started as like a hunch of okay, we really want to bring women together. We weren't seeing them at conferences. Now it has become, actually women are not a niche. They are the customer as an investor. And I'll share some.
Yeah, I don't know how a niche is, over 50%.
Yeah, I don't
of the
either, but I was told that. I was told
never
that.
Makes sense to me.
I was told I'd run out of women to interview. Larry, which is
I don't
laughable.
think that's the case. Yeah.
I haven't run out of women to interview.
I don't think you will.
I don't think I will.
Yeah.
But in terms of investing in particular, and if you think about it, right, there's a term that I didn't coin, but is out there called the Great Wealth Transfer. So in the next, and I'm sure if you're in wealth management, right, in the next several years, women are coming into more and more wealth at an unprecedented level, trillions of dollars. And so for a lot of different reasons. And there's been multiple studies done that show that women want to take more control of their money and their finances. And when it comes to managing money, stats are very high. When it comes to confidence in investing in where I should put my money, the stats drop a bit. So, but when they do invest, Larry, they traditionally will outperform men as investors. So when they're doing it, they're outperforming men. They're not doing it as much as men. So then there's a gap, right? And so that's really what I've seen is that women, and listen, men have wonderful qualities, right? And this is not about us versus them, but it's about creating the space to serve women in particular, because women outlive men. And for a lot of reasons, right, they're going to have more and more wealth to control. And they don't want to be mansplained. They don't want to work with people who are going to, these are smart women, right, that know what they're talking about. So it's just a matter of exposing women more to what they can take control of, obviously with a financial planner, but also on their own if they want to buy a property or build a portfolio. So that's what we stand on, is that the women that come to our community, they're not short on being driven. These are driven women, right? They are already coming to the table. It's just a matter of, negotiating the terms, making sure that they're putting, their needs and wants first. I've seen a lot of women, that are smart women who know what they're doing, give sometimes too much away, right? Especially when it comes to negotiating. So it's those kinds of things. But I do see the pendulum shifting a little bit. And I think a lot of companies that are working with maybe LPs that are women or et cetera, and if they're not really thinking, how do I serve them? They're going to get left behind. I really believe that. So something that I see a lot of women too that matter is quality is over quantity. So much of this business is how many properties do you own, or how, big is your net worth? I mean, yes, women can go bat to bat. I can certainly share my net worth with people if they want to know it. However, that doesn't really matter. What matters is making an impact and doing things that are important to me. I think that also is the same for a lot of women. Yes, they want to make money. They also want to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Imagine a relationship where financial conversations don't feel stressful, but actually bring you joy. We've designed a guide to help you have positive, meaningful money conversations with your partner. This isn't just another budgeting tool. It's a roadmap for building trust and connection. So if you're ready to start a joyful money journey with your partner, go to Midland.us/couplesjoy and download your free guide. Transform your financial future together, starting today. I think it's so important. We work with a lot of female entrepreneurs, and I think a lot of the points you talk about are important. And that's really one of the reasons why we talk about joy, and we don't talk about the money. We talk about, what is the money a tool to do for you? How is it going to generate joy for you? And I think that's the biggest impact, right? It's not about the money when all's said and done. It's about what the money represents and what the individual can do with it. So
that's right.
For the other entrepreneurs who are listening, how would you recommend they balance paying themselves versus using, monies that they have maybe in the business to fuel business growth? Because I think that's, a balance that sometimes gets, miscalculated to some degree, and people aren't really sure how to approach that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So between paying themselves or reinvesting back in the business is what?
Yeah, because I think like you said earlier, in your own personal example, right? You talked about early on, focusing on the business and maybe foregoing that, that house that other friends and family members might have been getting or thinking you should get, right? Or doing things a little bit more conservatively or differently, right? There's a balance there between creating that income today versus, spending or reinvesting back in the business, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the women that come to our community, they have done deals, right? They've done 5 to 10 deals. They have experience and they're looking to build a business around this versus it just being a side hustle, if you will. And something that I'll hear women often say, because a question is, okay, what's that number for you? What's your financial freedom number? And what's interesting is they go to these numbers and listen, people could have numbers all they want and go for it, but they'll give numbers like, I want 50,000 every month. Okay. That's awesome that you have that goal. And that's amazing. That's great. Is that what you need or what you want? But I think it's really important that we delineate the need and the want as we're exploring how do we make sure we pay ourselves first and then reinvest in what we're doing. And I think knowing those numbers helps alleviate some of the pressure or the stress, got to keep reinvesting in the business when I'm already at my need number, potentially. Now there's a want, right? And whatever that want is for people, for me, it's experiences. I mean, what's important is have experiences with my kids and my husband. That's top of the list. So when we have our needs, okay, what's our need income? The want income includes that experiences. And then we're hedging, okay, if we sell a property or have an influx of cash for some reason, how do we deploy to ensure we're taking care of the needs and continually doing that and putting some money aside for experiences? I think it's really easy though, as an entrepreneur, as you get older, it becomes much easier to take the money that maybe you would have invested in your business and put it and do something with your family or have an experience. I don't know, for me at least. I think that was really hard for me in my 20s and 30s. It was all about building. It was all about reinvesting. And as now I'm almost in my late 40s, I have less guilt around that. I'm like, no, time is not, I'm not getting younger. I'm actually getting older. I'm almost at 50. My husband just turned 50. So time becomes it actually becomes the most important thing. So in summary though, I think people knowing as an entrepreneur, what is the need for your business, for yourself, what is that number? And then what's the want? And really getting clear on how flexible they can be on the want so that they don't compromise those top things for themselves. And for us, it's travel and experiences. I'm not going to compromise spring break trip so I can reinvest in my company. Just not at this point. I want to do both. And okay, I'm going to figure out how I could do both versus either or.
Right. Yeah. I love experiences. I don't need stuff either. It just fills up the house.
Yeah,
but
totally.
we're a big experience family. And, early on, my why was my family. So I forgone growing the business as quickly as I could have maybe, but I wanted to be there with my kids, as they grew up. And when they left the house, then I really put the fuel to the fire. And, we're creating what I call Midland 2.0 now, which, we're 21 years old, but we're creating Midland 2.0. So I think it's, you can have both at different times. It doesn't have to be when everybody thinks it has to be. So great points. People have money hangups about, and I've heard you share that you've started to invest in your health, right? Invest in your health, not reactive doctor's appointments because, hey, you got to go check this out, but more proactive care. How did this shift your money habits, to make this a priority? Because obviously there's a cost involved to doing that. How are you able to shift that personally?
Yeah, I think I did it differently over the years, but I'd say one of the biggest investments I've ever made was doing a brain scan. and I did a brain scan at Amen Clinics. Amen Clinics is throughout the country. Dr. Amen, pretty well-renowned best-selling author, and talks a lot about your brain health. And so I was very intrigued with that because I had done a lot of work on my leadership or my personality. I'm very clear. I used to teach a personality assessment. So I felt like I had that handled. I know my pluses and my minuses. But in terms of brain health, I'm like, I have no idea. How do I really make sure my brain is healthy? It's not something we're taught. So it seemed a little bit on like the cutting edge, if you will. But I had watched an interview. Mel Robbins was talking a little bit about it and some other people that I respect. So I said, this is interesting. So, and it was thousands of dollars. It was not a cheap investment, but in not thousands, like tons, but still enough that we were like, okay, this is something we could go away and take the family on a vacation. But what I really moved me to doing that, Larry, is that it's about longevity. And then, as like I said, in my mid 40s, I'm like, my kids are young. I waited to have kids. So I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. So my kids are not what most people usually my age have. They usually have like a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. So I knew for me to be around a long time, I wanted to have that longevity. And it starts with your brain. And so that really motivated me to do that. Andres and I did that together as business partners. And I learned a lot. I had learned that I had ADHD. And I was like, that's interesting. In my mid 40s, I'm learning this about myself. But it's been so helpful because I decided to take a regimen of vitamins, which has been a game changer for me. They also found something in the back of my neck that I went to a chiropractor, an Atlas chiropractor, that helped redirect and kind of realign the back of my neck, which if you don't get corrected will cause dementia later in life. And we have dementia in my family, my great-grandparents, my grandmother. We have multiple people who have dementia. So, that money that I spent, like reverse engineer it for what? That's money and time well spent for me, more than maybe putting some new countertops in my kitchen or,
Right.
Again, it's not but when you're faced with decisions and you have a certain budget, I'd rather put that money into my health. And my husband and I are exploring some other things to do. You go take a day and get all this blood work done and just so many different, functional health kind of approaches. That's where my head goes with any sort of investment. And to me, that's an investment. It's not a cost.
Right. Yeah, I agree. We had a good friend of ours that went to the Princeton Longevity Center and had a full workup, and she never smoked cigarettes, and they found lung cancer, and it saved her life. So we are big proponents of, working towards and on our health and investing in it. So I think it's vitally important because, like you said earlier, if you're not here and you don't have the longevity, then it doesn't matter what the countertops are going to look like.
It really doesn't.
You're not going to be there to use them.
That's true.
You have to be here to use them. So great points. And I think that's probably one of the newest investments that has taken on a lot of focus because of, Mel Robbins, the book Good Energy, and, a lot of the things that are being talked about now about our food that we're eating, and people are getting more educated than they were, and myself included.
Yeah.
So thank you. So you co-founded the DeRosa Group with your husband. And, as someone who also works with their spouse, my wife is our chief marketing officer of the firm. What's your best tip for working with your spouse? Because some people say, oh, I could never do it. And others, do it and maybe not well. What's your best tip for those that work with their spouse?
There's so many. There's so many because my husband and I have actually worked full time together. We've worked sort of part time. We've had different, intensity levels, and now we're actually doing this ground up construction project, and it's a local project that's just him and I. It's not with investors or a larger team. So we've kind of done full circle. And something I would say is it's a really great tool. And I don't know about the folks listening, but communication could be the greatest, opportunity for any couple partnership to continually just improve and ensure you're really communicating, they're hearing, and vice versa. Communication is sometimes an area of conflict, right? So something that we've done that's been really helpful, and this is coming from someone who, my husband and I are quite similar. Sometimes spouses work together, invest together, and they're like a yin and a yang, which has benefits, right? For my husband and I, we actually have very similar personalities, and we both have ADHD. So we need tools to help us for different reasons and different sort of effects of that. One thing, because we're both could fairly get intense about our opinions or, what we're saying to each other, we use a ranking system. So 0, I have no attachment to really the subject matter, or 10, I'm like, I'm attached. I am really committed. I'm not going to let go of this very easily. And so usually when we're talking about something, especially with the property, doing different things in the business, we'll start and say, I'm like a 7 out of 10 on this. And he'll be like, yeah, I'm not attached. So what do you think? That's cool. Or if we're both 10 out of 10s, we really have to manage the expectation and really manage the conversation a little differently. If we're both 1 out of 10s on something, then it's like no brainer. Why even talk about this?
Right.
That has been a game changer. We'll use that verbiage. We say, I'm not attached. He knows what I mean. I know what I mean. And he, vice versa. That has been a very helpful tool, whether you work together or you don't. But I think we assume everyone's a 10 out of 10 on what's important to us. And it just makes for a lot of disconnects, to be honest. And that tool, that strategy has helped us in so many ways get through conversations or decisions about the business or an investment property much more easier, with much more ease and less conflict.
Great tip. And sounds like the social work's coming right out.
Exactly.
So, that baseline is super helpful. So listen, we've had a great conversation, and we end each of our shows asking our guests the same final question. This is the Midland Money Mindset. We're all about joy. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
I take a very intentional walk with my dog at noon. I start the day that way, but during the middle of the day, I'm back-to-back meetings, back-to-back calls, and I could just sometimes put my head down and, push through. Taking a break for me is it really fills my cup. I don't take my phone. I leave my phone home. I take a 10-minute walk with my dog. I look at her. I smile because I love my dog, mini golden doodle, Bailey. And that really brings me joy. That moment, that 10-minute break, even though it seems so simple and trite, brings me joy in the middle of my day. And I take some breaths. I get recentered for the next half of the day and just kind of remind myself what I'm doing, where I want to leave an impact. And that centers me for that 10 minutes. So everyone talks about the morning, and I do meditation, I do prayer, and that's great to kick your day off. But the middle of the day is quite honestly when I need it the most, typically, because it's like that middle of the day moment that you can continue your energy high, or something's bothering you from the morning, resets, recalibrates, and it's a moment to, just have a joy moment. And walking my dog is a joy moment because I just adore her.
Sounds awesome. You don't need that extra cup of coffee,
No.
right? So you just go out there for the walk.
Well, listen.
Yeah. Works just the same. So Liz, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we're going to have all of your information in the show notes. But if people want to learn more about you, learn more about InvestHER, or connect with you, what's the easiest and the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we're very active on Instagram at the Real Estate InvestHER, HER. And we do a lot of free trainings online. Men are welcome, women are welcome, everyone's welcome to our trainings. And if you go to our website, therealestateinvesther.com/trainings, you'll see we have some really cool trainings coming up. And I also invite women to consider coming to InvestHERCon. We have our annual conference in June of 2026. It's a very transformational, special 2.5-day conference for women who are deepening their knowledge of investing and doing it with other like-minded women. So I would invite the women listening to take a chance and come to Scottsdale, beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona in June.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for sharing with us and our listeners. I appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Larry. Appreciate it.
Liz Faircloth reminded us that wealth isn't just about numbers, it's about freedom, fulfillment, and the courage to invest in ourselves. Her journey from social work to co-founding InvestHER shows that when women lift each other up, everyone rises. Liz, thank you for inspiring us to build not only our portfolios, but lives filled with purpose, confidence, and joy. Liz Faircloth and InvestHER can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Midland Money Mindset. Remember, it's not just about the money, it's finding joy in the journey and embracing the right mindset. If you love the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow along for more tips and inspiration. Please visit the social links below to connect with Larry or his guests. Until next time, keep smiling, keep thriving, and remember to think about, what did you do today that brought you joy?
The opinions voiced in the Midland Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Guests on the Midland Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.